Hi, everybody, and welcome to Angel Meadows, my conversation with friends. Today, my guest, I'm so happy that she agreed to come back on, that she wasn't scared away the last time I had her, is Dorothy Holder. Dorothy, yay! I gotta get an applause thing, especially for you.
Yeah, I'll do it.
There
Oh,
we
no,
go,
it's sad if
yay!
you applaud yourself, isn't
No,
it?
okay,
So,
anyway.
you know.
Here we
Yeah.
go.
And so how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Looking forward to a bit of summer. Bit of summer weather would be nice.
Yeah,
Yes.
that would
Bit of
be nice if
fishing.
we could go back into summer, but we're just turning into fall. Okay, let's.
That's right. Yes. Yes. But you know, that's what's got to happen. When I lived in the outback of Australia, that I would have killed for a season change. You know, it's all very well to have just no rain and sunshine all the time or most of the time, but it does get rather monotonous, and there's a period of time after X amount of years that you just would kill for a bit of cold or a bit of rain or a bit of something.
Okay. No, here it's like, no, now. It's like, I'm like, okay, let's get out the long underwear. I don't do cold.
Oh,
I
I
don't
don't
do
do
cold.
cold. Yet you live in Canada,
I
right?
know, and I live in the worst part of Canada. I live in Quebec, where, like, 6 feet of snow in one little snowstorm is nothing, and I'm like, oh, I freeze my bum off. But, just because I was born here doesn't mean
Yeah.
I have to enjoy
It
winter.
doesn't mean you're acclimated, right? It's like,
No, no,
yeah,
no,
they
no.
might say it takes only a couple of seasons to acclimate, but not for
I
me. It's
got
a
it.
lifetime, and I'm still working on it.
Exactly. I'm gonna be 57 this year, and I still don't like it. I like spring and
Huh?
I like fall. But see, fall's a little nippy, but it's okay. It's what I know is coming after. That's what scares
It's the,
me. That white
it's
stuff
the
I gotta
red hair. You
shovel.
see, you've got zero tolerance for changes in temperature.
I just got zero tolerance.
Yeah, there's always that as a possibility. I was trying to narrow that down just a tad. But yeah.
You're trying to be nice.
Trying to be nice.
Okay. Well, today you are here and you're going to do a few readings with your
Yes.
new deck, but I had a couple
Yes.
of questions. I mean, I probably asked them like a bajillion times before, but for those people who haven't heard, um, we're gonna ask them again anyway. So, you amongst, can you give me a short list of exactly what you do? And I know one of them is aura readings, but go from there. I started at A.
Okay, so you start with the A, and there's aura readings and anything associated with that. So that's the clairvoyant, psychic side of things, mediumship, reading into the future. The auras is my passion, and there isn't a reading that I'm going to do, mediumship or otherwise, that isn't going to include that somewhere in there, especially when it comes to energy therapy, which is something I do a lot of. And of course, reading the aura for me there is about health in the body and more of a medical style diagnosis. And then, of course, we move on to, I've got a diploma in clinical hypnotherapy, which again I see as that's in the meditative zone. Works with all of these other things, and I think it's important if you're going to use meditations, and if you're, in particular in a modern world where we do have a lot of people making claims to qualifications they don't have. If you're not using the right words, things don't quite work, You can go on YouTube, you can listen to any amount of meditations, and some are brilliant, and try and take 19 out of 20 and they're really not good at all. And so, I think that's a bit of a shame. So the idea there is that if you can find something that actually works, you do better. But if you find things that don't work, you may blame yourself. If you've already tried a few things and you think this is where I'm heading, I like the idea of change happening quickly. And for me, it shouldn't be hard work. I lived with my mum struggling with her weight all her life and all our lives. We were born into it, if you like. And I came away from that. My biggest takeaway as an adult was it shouldn't be a lifelong struggle. Nothing should be. And so all of these things to me work together to build up either programs or a system or a way to help kickstart or drive somebody into the next space they want to be in or need to be in. Most people don't come to somebody like me for that style of stuff until they've tried a lot of things. So they've already got really low confidence and don't necessarily believe that they can get what they want out of it or be successful at it. So I always think that's a little bit of a shame. I often think if I could got you right at the beginning there when you were full of boom, you would be so much happier for that last 10 years, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the sort of things that I do. And of course I paint, you know, not many people that know me are unaware of that side of things. And so that sort of translates into, you know, creating energy images. So you get energy images, instant visions that I create, because when I do my aura readings, I also create pictures of those, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so those images are a way to connect to something that it's more difficult to comprehend if you don't visualize it, you know, if you can't see it. And while it's going to always be the fact that I created it and that's what you're looking at, it's usually a damn close representation. And when I do the higher self visionary pictures and imagery, they're for you. You know, they come out of me reading you. And when I'm reading people and I have my instant visions at times when I'm doing that type of work, I get these amazing pictures. I can see clouds or ships or weird and wonderful things, and they get incorporated into the picture. And then you have what I call like your energy picture, or whatever you want to call it. Energy totem is what I've been calling them. And so for me, it's that you've got something you can walk away with, you can put on your wall if you want to, you can print it off, and you can have it on your computer, and it speaks to you in a particular way. And that sort of really, that kind of work led to creating the cards, because I've been reading cards. I've been a bit of a card freak, tarot card freak, for quite a long time. And I went off to a lady called Sylvia Shanti Vowlis right at the beginning of my journey. That's once I'd done the energy. So I started with the energy work, and that opened up a lot of things. And then I did my big meditation period. And then I went on to let's just get knowledge around this sort of attitude after I had all the feelings, sensations and stuff happening. I went off to a New Zealand lady who is very cerebral, scholarly, and she is a master in the Kabbalistic history, by the way. So she's no slouch. And her interpretation of the cards and the way that they link to the Kabbalah and historically to religions, her knowledge was phenomenal. And so I went off to her to learn about the cards, not how to read the cards, if that makes sense. You know, this is what the cards are and what they represent. Part of that was that understanding that the idea of them is to tweak something in your psyche. It's to bring something out that you may not be fully aware of. And to get that, you do need to actually understand the cards. And that's the little bit with tarot that's got a bit lost over the last 20 or so years.
Yeah.
Is that when you don't understand what that symbology means, you can't have it tweak a part of your psyche. It's not an automatic process, as some might like to say it is. It really isn't. If you don't understand what the stave represents, or the little green leaf represents, or that pale blue represents, or what that crab's doing there on the side of that throne, and what does the throne represent, what's the white column, the black column, if you don't understand what those actually mean, they can't tweak parts of you as you're looking at your cards. So picture reading, when I was learning all of this, there were a lot of people teaching tarot picture reading, and it's to be remembered that back in that day, oracle cards were not a thing. They just were not a thing. It was tarot. That was about it. Doreen Virtue's angel cards sort of broke the mold for oracle cards. Nobody wanted to know about them. You went to a tarot reader, if that makes sense, or if anybody remembers. You didn't go to an oracle card reader. Yeah. And these women and men had a lot of knowledge, for the most part, about their product, about their cards, about what they meant. So they were quite amazing in their own right. When you come back to the meanings of the cards getting a bit lost, it opened up the unwillingness to learn, which I'm not saying with disdain, but it's a reality, that unwillingness to learn the cards because of the amount of people who wanted to read their own cards for themselves or in their little family group, which actually goes way back. If you go back to the 1700s, even as early as the 1500s, that's how cards were read. There were playing cards, and people would sit around in their little, I don't even know, drawing rooms, and they'd have dinner and they'd have drinks, and then they would draw cards for each other and try and read them. And that was the original, really the original way that the cards sort of came into being the way they are. So to me, it's like a little bit of a full circle. And then, of course, you've got in between there people like Mademoiselle Lenormand, who you know I hold with deep respect, who became a famous tarot reader, but she used her own cards because there were not tarot decks as such around in her day. So she drew a set of cards and she used playing cards over that. And so you look at most Lenormand, and even the recent ones that I've created, I'm changing it because I've put the little playing card inside the picture card, which was done in the 1800s, but it isn't actually how she did it. And if you want to know how I know, people, there's an etching of her working. There's an etching, a drawing that was done, and she's laying out of cards, and you can clearly see her picture cards and her laying out playing cards over them. So now I'm recreating that whole deck so that we take the playing cards off that, and I'll create two decks. And that makes sense to me because whenever I'm reading them, I'm always trying to decide which part to read. Do I read that King of Diamonds in there, or do I read the anchor, or do I read the stork, or, you know, which part are you meant to read? So it's too convoluted that way. And I find it very difficult myself. So I'm separating those two out. And in the meantime, of course, now I've moved on to looking at, if people don't want to learn tarot, I've created a Victorian tarot deck, which I really enjoy. But also the idea then is I went to the Sacred Souls, which you've seen. The Sacred Souls Oracle is purely about what was kind of being hunted for when we went to Oracle cards. There's a deck of cards with a very simple picture, say the angel cards or the fairy cards, those kind of things. And there's a lot of these. I'm just using those because most people know them.
Yeah.
The picture itself doesn't really do much. It's just pretty, and it's all about reading the meaning in the book. You know, Toni Baron Reid, she does the same thing. She's got a picture, but it's reading the meaning that counts. And I think that has a lot of value when you're just reading for you. It has almost no value when you're trying to read for somebody else. So you can draw the card and you can read the interpretation, but you lose that I picked that card, you know, if the person isn't picking it for themselves, which is how these decks are designed to be used. It's fun and it's nice. So then that's where the Sacred Souls came from, that desire for people to have a read with their friends or play around, people like, you know, doing shows, that sort of thing. And then they can look at a picture that's really quite complex. And so when it's quite complex, then it does tweak something in you if you're thinking of that person and you notice the weather vane, you can talk about wind, direction, you know what I mean? And I got that idea from the Voyager Tarot. Are you familiar with that?
I've seen it a couple of times. It's a deck on my wish list. So yes,
it's a tarot deck. He's done another deck since. Actually, he modified that deck. The first one that I had from years ago, again, the internet wasn't a really big deal, so I'd found it, bought it. I'd already looked at the Crystal Ally cards, which are my personal cards. I don't really do readings with them as such. But when I looked at his cards, I noticed that I found it visually exciting, and because I'm visual, I would see things in that. It still wasn't as complex as it could be, but at the same time, I could see where he was going with it, and he turned it into a tarot deck because all of these companies won't print your cards unless basically you're signed on with them, which is rarer and rarer these days, or it fits a mold, you know. And he had a computer-generated deck, and mine are computer graphics as well, and so they don't like that. I've been told very clearly now by a number of publishers is we don't do computer graphics. So he self-published essentially, and he now publishes under his own brand. And it's to me a crazy thing because he managed without any real assistance to get that out there in a time where the internet wasn't there. But when I looked at his cards, that really spoke to me that the pictures were involved enough that I could look at the picture and I would try and ignore the writing. I didn't like the writing on the card. I was like, that doesn't work necessarily, the two things. And once you see the writing, I was teaching classes at the time, and I'd say, ignore the writing on the cards, but actually that's so much easier said than done. You've seen it, it's there, it's going to influence no matter what you do. Yep. So that was okay. So the sacred souls for me are never going to have names on the cards, and they were all about, what do you pick out of that? You can go to a book and you can look at it if you like, or you can make the deck your own by never ever looking at the book. Or if you're going to read for yourself, then use the book as a way of objective interpretation. And in the book, what I did change from most was, yes, there was a card meaning, say it could be trust, right? The cards will have a number on them rather than a name. Say it could be trust. But also the symbology, if you were tweaked by the wolves or the angel wings on that card or the alley, you could go and you could look it up. There's a little mask in it. And if that tweaked you, you'd look that up. And that would be your information, not necessarily just the page. So I wanted to make it really complex. As you know my style, the more complex, the better. And the whole idea there was you could have 36 cards. I'm actually wanting to build that a little bit too now. I'm tossing it up and down. But I wanted a card deck that didn't have a lot of cards, but actually you could draw the same card literally 7 or 8 times and be drawn to something different in it. So if you wanted to read for other people, there's no training required. Your interpretation then becomes your own as you look at the card. And I've played with this quite a bit by getting people to choose a card or pushing a card at them and letting them tell me what they think it means. And, you know, we had a little Skype thing where people were reading the cards, and it worked beautifully. And so that's my aim, is that other people can just get these cards, learn nothing, and do what I call accurate, good readings with them. And if that's something somebody wants to do for themselves, their friends, or professionally, then, like I said, they can make the deck their own. They don't have to have a deck that somebody else has explained to them, and then they've remembered the definition. So a lot of people with tarot struggle because when they come to me to learn tarot, they'll go, oh, I've got all these meanings in my head. It's like, it's not about those meanings. There should be one word, one line, and then the rest is intuitive, basically, if you understand the symbolism of the card. So that's why it's a big learning for tarot. And so I get that. So that's what the Sacred Souls Oracle was, to try and cut through people who wanted to, whether they wanted to be, you know, financially professional or amateur, they wanted to read cards for others and they wanted to play around with that. And with the idea of learning somebody else's interpretation of a card instead of the symbology on the tarot, there's a whole heap of stuff that gets lost. Now, you're not really reading the card or intuiting it. You've recited somebody else's meaning, which can't work. If you go and have a look at Rider-Waite's pictorial guide to the tarot, that's to his tarot, he very clearly is a mishmash. And a lot of people struggle with it. They'll look at it and they'll go, well, it doesn't really tell you what the card is. And I said, well, no, because as far as he's concerned, it's only about the picture. And that's where this whole pictorial idea gets a bit smushed in there. When you go and you look at the symbols, he's got all of the symbols written out. These are what's in the picture. This is what they mean. And all written out. And what his expectation was that you learn those, not learn a card meaning. And so it can be interpreted differently by different readers based on, here's the symbols, but actually this is the part of the card that's tweaking my consciousness right now. So you've got 78 cards with a basic meaning, and then within that you've got the structure, which is the picture, which was so carefully thought out and aligned with the Kabbalah and aligned with spiritual understanding and ancient writings. These guys all considered themselves scholars. So I've gone, boom, that way. Then I'm playing around with Lenormand's deck, of course, and then I've just finished a deck, well, it's not quite finished, but I've just completing a deck called the Dark Rose Divination set, which is a bit of a baby for me. I really like it. And there are words on it. It's got a dark aspect to it, which I really wanted to bring back in because I was working hard to get away from the occult idea. The tarot deck was never occult. That only came about really because of Aleister Crowley trying to put his little stoned brain energy into it. Well, it's true. The man was an addict, you know, and he put 2 wives into rehab clinics in the end. So it was one of those things that the solstice, I always look at that, and I know it's very controversial, so I really love, poking pins at this one, because he was just off his face most of the time. But the solstice is, if you go and look at, Arthur Waite's came out before, by the way, significantly about 15 years earlier. It was published, and it was published that everybody could get it. The solstice meanings are just very slightly different wordings, except for one or two things, like he demands that it's an Egyptian base and it's this and it's that. So you've got different things there, but actually the solstice is the creative works of an artist, and they're amazing, and she had free reign with it. He didn't tell her what to do, whereas with Arthur Waite, and I can't remember the name of the woman now who did his artwork, but he said, I want these poles, I want this, I want that, and then she placed them and did the artwork, whereas the artist for the solstice, she just looked at the meanings and painted things how she wanted to, which is why it's very artistic, but not necessarily inventive. I don't know if that makes sense to you or not. But anyway, so we've got these two guys suddenly publishing within 15 years of each other, Arthur Waite first and then Aleister Crowley. And Aleister Crowley is trying to hit on the almost Satanist side. And of course, unfortunately, as time's gone by, that level of engineering in the early 1820s became what people saw the tarot in general as, which was an occult experience, when in actual fact it never was treated that way earlier than that, and it was never meant to be that way. It's the story of life. It's how we see life, and it's a little bit of a guide, if we can understand it or work it or find somebody that does, to give us a clue or two as to what we need to do, what we are doing, and what the best thing to do might be. And if we treat it that way, then of course we will always do well with it. Was that a little bit too much?
No.
Is that all bit too much?
But I'm going to have to go back and listen, because you always talk quickly. You need to breathe, but you can do this without breathing. So I have to go back and listen. I always do when it comes with you. But that's one of the things about you that I love. You don't just, somebody asks, can you tell me this? You don't just stick with this. You explain, to the point where people get it. Yeah.
Well, with cards, I do quite often get asked, why are you making cards? Well, that's why. It's 20 years of why, not 5 minutes, of, I think I'll do that and make some money.
Yeah.
I think I'll do that because I've been teaching people for years, and I've been reading cards for years, and I've seen what they struggle with, what the individuals struggle with, but I also seen the variety of people trying or wanting to read cards, and for why. And if you want to just get a card of the day draw or something like that, to me it's very important that what you get then is very directive and very non-subjective. For example, you will hear a lot of tarot readers say, I can read for others really well, but I can't read for myself. And that's because it's like editing your own work. You see what you want to see, right? You see what you expect to see. And if you're and I always say this too, if you're going to read for yourself, if you're going to draw cards for yourself, never do it when you're grumpy, never do it when you're really sad, never do it when you're hurting, because you will interpret the cards incorrectly. And I've played this game with a lot of people over the years. They've gone off, drawn these cards, and they mean this, and they're wailing into their cup of tea. And I'm like, well, that's not how I see that at all. And so it's not just a question of interpretation, it's a mindset when you're interpreting. So when you're doing that for somebody else, you are objective. Obviously, you're not invested in the situation. Exactly. So when you are reading for yourself, the more directive the card is and the less subjective it is, the better. And that's why I've created I called these originally the creepy cards, because I knew I was going to go a little bit left in them. And so then they become the dark rose divination, which I really liked as well, because, you get thorns with roses, right?
Yep.
So there's a bit of everything in there. But the idea is there's definitely a bold statement on each card. And I haven't even tried to write the book. I'm going to go back and write the book as it's all sort of coming to pass. Every time I do readings with my cards, my new cards, I get to know them better, as odd as that might sound. I've gone past being the artist, and then I've gone into being the reader. I know why I put elements in a card, but they still need to translate when you're doing a reading. So there's still that visual element of which part of this card is attracting you. But here's what this card means. If it says bondage, it means, it's more than restriction. It's a self thing,
Yeah.
whereas a restriction can be external. Bondage is yourself. Only you can allow yourself to be tied into something or to feel like you can't get out of something. So they have a whole different range of meanings. And then with the dark rose divination, I'm really trying to do that to make it as directive as possible, whereas the sacred souls have gone the exact opposite way to try and not be directional at all. So, yeah, interesting stuff.
How many
There's
decks
that
have you created?
5.
5. I think I've seen 3 of them, maybe.
Oh, have you? Have you not seen them all?
I
So
don't.
you've seen the Victorian Tarot? No?
No, I don't
Clearly
think.
not.
I
So
don't
the
think so. No.
Victorian Tarot, the Lenormand, the new Lenormand I've called it, but of course that one now is undone because I'm redoing it. The pictures will stay the same. I'm just taking the cards off.
I haven't seen that one. That I know.
Oh, you haven't seen that one either?
No.
Okay. And so, of course, there's a Sacred Souls Oracle. You
That
know
one.
the Witch's Britches one,
Yes.
surely, the Witch's Oracle.
Yes.
And I've lost myself now. Hang on, I have to look at my own file. What have I just said?
Witches, Bridges, Sacred Souls, the Lenormand, the other one,
Victorian Tarot,
Victorian,
and
and
Dark Rose
today,
Divination.
Circle
Yeah.
Divination. One of the things, you're gonna have to show me the other 2 decks. But one of the things that I like about when I talk to you and when I listen to you read, when you do readings, and I was part of that Skype crew that got to do
Yes.
readings with your cards, was that you've taught me to whatever stands out in the card, because your cards are not just like one dimensional. There's a lot going on. They're, as I call them, they're busy cards, but busy in a good sense because everybody sees something different.
Right.
And even
I like
when
busy cards.
yeah, and even when it's like, if I look at the card and you did one time and I saw something, a road, I think it was a street sign or something, like a road, and somebody else saw the same thing, but they saw the word, whereas I just saw the sign. So each
Yeah.
was different. So I think that's one thing that's really cool about being your friend and hanging around with you is that you teach me without teaching me. You just you do your thing and I soak it up like a little sponge. So I think if anybody ever has a chance, that's right, I'm like a giant sea sponge. If anybody ever gets a chance to listen to Dorothy on any of her shows, and by the way, Dorothy has a great show on Mondays. I think it's 5 Eastern Standard Time on Ghost Call Radio, and you do the weekly tarot reading, which
Astrology forecast.
astrology focus, which always ends up going, oh God, here it comes again. And I look back at the end of the week, even if I don't get to listen to the show live, I look back at the end of the week and go, okay, she was right. Yeah, okay, there we go.
Yeah. And you'll notice with that every time I create a new deck, I change the deck I use for the astrology forecast. Again, so that I'm playing with my own decks. So, and I know the accent's going to make a few people in their laugh when I say I'm playing with my own deck.
Okay.
I've had this before, but there's no other way to play it.
Deck
to
people,
say that.
DECK deck.
Yeah, deck, and so it really gets me very familiar with not just the creating of it, but the using of that deck. And then I go out and get other people to play with it and interpret it and see what trouble they're having. For example, I've got one lady that I've used extensively to see how she goes, because she doesn't read tarot or anything like that as a rule, but wants to. She does the Sacred Soul Oracle really brilliantly. Like, she loves it, and that's because there's no direction. She just has to see what she sees, interpret it, and it's usually bang on. And then when she had a look at the Dark Rose Divination, she found it quite a lot harder, and that's because you really have to be, if you're going to read it for yourself, you just see what it is and you just be very direct with it, rather than trying to look for hidden agendas. You allow it to take you down a path rather than creating a path within your own psyche or your own intuition. It's quite a different experience in the way a person reads, and readers of cards do read differently. They have a different type of thing. I am incredibly visual. I'm ridiculously visual. And so you get others that aren't quite the same way. But again, I've got a really strong remit in my mind for people reading for themselves as well, because I've seen a lot of mush-ups and people getting themselves really wound into tight little balls of anxiety because they're trying to draw, a whole pile of tarot cards that don't really understand about soulmates and twin souls and is this guy interested in me? And they might sound trite to people, and I know very often it gets rubbished on shows. But in that moment, that person is agonizing over it. Obviously there are plenty of rubbishy callers and stuff, but they're agonizing over it, and that's why they're drawing cards, and they'll draw cards every day, and they're not getting their answers, and that's why I wrote the books, actually. It was like, here's a good way to have layouts that match the question you're asking, and here's a good way to make sure you've got all the right questions for the type of answer you're seeking. And then you can save yourself this, I've just done a Celtic cross layout, or I've just had 5 cards I've pushed out there to see if this guy's interested in me. It's like, well, no, that's a little much. It's OTT, and you'll always end up confused, and you won't get it, and so on and so on and so on. So it's for all of what I've put out there with regards to cards, it's to try and make it easier for people to read for themselves, and to feel more comfortable with that, because there's such a high interest in that. Right now I'd say people are more interested in reading for themselves than actually going to a tarot reader and getting a reading in life. It's not that they don't do that, because obviously they do, but this whole reading for yourself, you can tell by the fact that there's new cards coming on the market every month. There's hundreds of new decks, because there are so many people wanting to have decks. And I've got a very good friend up north here, and she's got, I think, about 12 or 13 oracle card decks, because they are very limited, and they're, she'll have a little bit of a read, but she actually uses 3 or 4 decks to get one piece of information with one card from each. And that gives me a huge insight. If you need 3 or 4 decks, then each deck is failing you, if you can't get a direction from basically just basic life questions. We're not talking major issues here. And I've always sort of got this sort of attitude that if you really want in-depth information, forgetting psychics and mediums and clairvoyants, from a deck of cards, you need a deck of cards that has that depth and that range, that you can get those layers of information out of it. And there's still only one deck that does that, to my knowledge, and that's the tarot, which is still the biggest. And I don't mean all tarots. The Rider-Waite tarot deck is the biggest selling deck what am I saying? Deck of cards.
Yes.
In the world. It's the biggest selling deck of cards in the world to this day. It's never pipped by anything. So that tells you that that's where people are either starting, or when they get that Rider-Waite deck, they're holding it. It's an interesting thing, because while there are plenty of what I call fanciful cards, you've got the cat people and you've got all these wonderful cards, and I'm certainly not dissing them in any way. They're really, a lot of them are more of an artistic adventure for the artist, following a theme. You've got Star Trek and you've got vampire cards and so on, rather than actually having, and you've got cards that following a theme that have to be called a tarot deck if you're going to get them published, sort of. There's a lot of that goes on in the publishing world. They sell more tarot decks than any other type of card as well. So it's an interesting thing when you start looking at what's on the market and how you can get that into your home, I guess. But bottom line there is that this is this home reader thing that's going on. And so I'm sort of get torn between the two. The Victorian tarot, you're probably better off being a tarot reader or understanding tarot to read it, but you can glean a lot from the pictures. So I was kind of aiming for that. I was aiming for what I call concept cards. When you look at a tarot deck, every card has a concept. It has a broad thing, which is a paragraph, basically. You can make it a paragraph, 4 or 5 words. That's all you need for a deck. And then if you've got the picture, then if that picture can represent the concept, for example, the 8 of Cups is a card of letting go of something. And so I've created a picture that conceptualizes letting go of something. And so that was the idea of the Victorian tarot. And you may not be aware of this, but I have this little romantic side in me when it comes to Victorian era and Art Deco. I really love it, you know. And so that drew me extensively to have this deck that sort of radiated to these sort of, you know, gas lantern type streets with big shadows and women with bustles and men with top hats, you know, that kind of thing.
I need
I just
stick.
You haven't? I just can't believe you haven't seen that one. I'm thinking, how did I miss you with that?
I don't know, but I'm gonna have to go I have to go stalking you for you decks.
You need to stalk my decks.
There you go. Okay, we're gonna get a question in the chat room. Eric Glenn, surely people reading for themselves always focus on the negatives because they think anything positive is their own desires. True.
Well, actually, I don't really see that. It's just a tendency that if you're not happy, you will probably see the negative. For example, if you did draw the Eight of Cups, so we'll use that as an example, and you are having problems with your partner, and you're scared it's going to break up, or you're not sure what's going to happen, you've just had a big fight, you're going to probably look at that as let go of the guy or the girl. It's like, oh, you have to let go of that relationship. And so people go, because it's feeding their fear, not really what they want. You know, I'm scared I just broke that relationship. I'm scared he or she is going to leave me now or not want to be with me. And so we're reading into the fear. If you read that same card and you were really happy, you're on top of things, you had no relationship issues, your first thought usually is going to radiate to, oh, I wonder what I do have to let go of. And it may be an old belief because it represents all of those things. It could be an old belief. It could be a behavior, an attitude, and even in that breakdown scenario, even in that scenario where you've had a fight, it might be let's look at this. You're recycling this. You know, whatever you're fighting about, let that go.
Yeah.
So that's why you go to another reader when things are in crisis mode. And I really firmly believe no matter what or who you are, if you need external or if you need that kind of advice, if it is a crisis, you are better off going to either a tarot reader, clairvoyant, advisor, anybody, than trying to interpret it yourself, because your fears will outweigh your hopes. And you'll find yourself reading it twice. You'll find yourself, oh, I hope it's this and I'm scared it's that, and it just doesn't help you at all. You can end up more anxious. And that's why they draw again and again and again. But the first card, and that's my biggest advice to anybody, your first card's the right card.
Yep.
Stop right there. Stop right there. And then if you really can't sort of sort that out within yourself, then seek professional and get proper advice. And that way you can also get advice, and that's the important part. The thing we're not good at is advising ourselves if we're in crisis. So you want somebody who's objective. That's why we talk to friends. It doesn't matter who it is, as long as it's somebody who hasn't got an agenda, who can advise you that maybe you need to step away from that situation. Maybe you need to just give somebody a little bit of space. Maybe you need to visit the area of your life that keeps coming back up and cycling. I've put a picture in the chat of one of the Victorian cards, the Victorian Tarot card, and that's a major arcana card.
Going around the universe.
Yeah. And so that's the World card in a standard tarot. So I've changed the names to suit the concept of the card as well. And so that's pretty much how I've treated this deck. Is there's a concept that every card has. And the World card is about everything's available to you. You know, everything's open. It's up to you what you make of things. It's sort of a bit like a wild card insofar as I have got a wild card in there, but it's a bit like that insofar as, you know, basically you've got everything you need. What are you going to do with it? So the world is your oyster is a really good description. And so in more spiritual circles, the tendency is to think of the universe will provide. You know, everything is there for you. You just need to say thank you for having it and exercise it, utilize it, work it. So that's what I've done with the Victorian Tarot, is pure conception, the conceptual elements of a whole card, as opposed to the broken down pictorial elements. There are elements in here, but it's up to you which way you want to do that. The better you know the tarot, the better you'll be able to manage the concept of the cards. So,
well, I have a lovely book that I have been meaning to read, but yeah, you know, I kind of get drawn here, there, and the other where a shiny little thing. It's a lovely book. It says Learn Tarot by this woman called
Ah!
Dorothy Holder.
Well, yes, there's that. That was the reason I wrote the next two, the Tarot Companion. I've written 4 little ones now. I'm calling them Tarot Bites with a BYTES because a big problem for people learning tarot often is the fact that there's so much. You know, they go, oh my gosh, you know, there's there's so much, but you can break that down to quite literally. You don't have to read a tarot book. You draw a card and you go, I'm not sure what that's about. So you go, and first to me, this is the way to always do it, because I was as flummoxed as everybody when I started. I mean, that's the reality, was that I noticed over all the books that I was getting out of the library, no internet, out of everywhere I went. When I went to Sylvia Shanti Valas, the one thing she taught me that was so profound to me is if you can't say it in a sentence, you're overthinking it when it comes to a tarot card. And I was just blown out of the way, out of the water by that. If you can't say it in a sentence. In other words, every card can be described in one sentence.
Okay.
It's in your book.
I said I haven't read it yet.
Yeah. No, but that's the point. So every card has a few words that are very dominant in their interpretation. And then there's a sentence that encapsulates that. Okay?
Yeah.
For example, if you're looking at this deck, the Fool I've called risk, because that's what the Fool represents, taking a risk. One sentence. Yeah? It's not necessarily a new beginning, and so it's that understanding that taking a risk can mean a new beginning, but it could mean taking the next step as well in something that you've already started. So there's that risk element with the Fool at all times. The risk is, I'm going to do it. I don't know how it's going to go, but I'm going to do it. And at some point in life, all get driven into that zone for some reason, whether it's moving a house, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's starting a relationship, a business, doesn't matter what it is. There's a point where it's like, well, you know, I'm going to just step off the cliff, and that's where the original pictorial comes from. Mine's got a man walking a tightrope. You know, he's walking on a tightrope above a city far below him. And so you've got that element of, well, I'm just going to do it, and once I start, I've set something in motion. And that's the understanding. That's why it's a cliff. And the original tarot, that's why he's sort of stepping off a big rock, is that once you step off, you've initiated something that you can't stop. You have to now live it in some way, shape or form. Yeah. So it's that understanding that every card can be broken down to one sentence. And if it can't be, you're overthinking it. And then from there, you take it directionally to what your question was. You know, then you start putting your elements together of what was the question to start with. What was, because one of the biggest mistakes in tarot reading when people are learning that I've seen through students over the years has been the tendency to ask a question about career, get a card that represents, you know, the cup, say, and then switch their thing to what the card is instead of allowing the card to represent the question. So then they'll switch and think, oh, this must be, I'm going to love my job, or I'm going to hate it, or it's going to have this going on, when of course it's got nothing to do with that. If the question is about career, then it's about applying that concept of that card to the question. Make sense?
Yes, dear.
Did that. Good.
One of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of people, like you said, a lot of people have made their own version of the tarot deck. But through what you've been explaining is that Rider-Waite was the first person to create the deck that we know of. You know.
It's the first deck that incorporated a minor arcana, which is smaller secrets or lesser secrets, and a major arcana, which is larger or greater secrets. That's actually what they are, what the meaning is. So before that, the major arcana elements were around for a very long time. Eliphas Levi played around with them, and he referenced works from a century before him. And he was in his latter life by the time Arthur Waite came along. So these guys were all learning from each other. Eliphas Levi has a few books about it where he's hand-drawn the pictures. They're not marvellous, but the hangman is pretty much how we see it in the Rider-Waite deck, and pretty much every deck after that follows that tenet, the hanged man.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then of course you had the playing cards, which I was already saying they were called taroki. I think that's a pronunciation that I could get by with, but it's probably not right. And they were used very commonly in manor houses, etc., in Italy. And of course, the playing cards with Mademoiselle Lenormand, she was in her last years and an old lady by the time Arthur Waite was around as a young man. So when you're looking at these things, none of them have been put together, and that's what Arthur Waite actually did do. He put the minor arcana, which was the playing card deck,
Mm-hmm.
and the major arcana is one deck, and so he formed what we currently see as tarot, although they both existed in sort of separate ways prior to that. So that's very interesting. Yes, he did.
But since him, everybody else that's built or created, drawn or conceptualized their own tarot deck, the base, the foundation is the Rider-Waite deck. They just, they make it a little bit differently. They're a different picture, but the like you said here, the 21 is the universe, but in the Rider-Waite deck, it's the world.
The world, yeah. So what I've done is I haven't actually tried to create something that isn't a tarot deck with this. It is a tarot deck. Mm-hmm. So yes, I've conceptualized. The conceptualizations aren't Arthur Waite's, and that's what I'm saying. He took it from people before him as well. So there's that understanding for the major arcana. But yes, basically there's that, or there's I don't know if you've heard of the Osho Zen Tarot. But it's not really a tarot deck at all. They've created this beautiful deck. They've created 78 cards. When you use the Osho, the Osho Zen interpretation, it fits beautifully. It's very difficult to learn. It's very Zen. Anything is sort of like mystically mad. As you read it, you're like, what does that mean? It's very much like talking to angels, if you like. They're very much. It's not that they're Ridley, but it's very much, I'm going to give you this, now go and work that out for yourself. What does that mean? So they're not really cards that you lay out and read successfully because of these deep, hidden, kind of weird Zen type interpretations. Mm-hmm. But to get them published, they needed to that's what I'm saying. This is what the publishing houses have done, which I think is a bit damaging. They needed to make it 78 cards. They needed to call it a tarot deck and align each card with a tarot. When you look at the cards, they've got nothing to do with anything when it comes to tarot. They've got no references whatsoever. So the meaning of the cards and the numbering of the cards and the designation of the cards is just to appease publishers. So when you try to read them as tarot, you cannot actually find it very easy to take that picture and get a psychic kind of tweaking from it on any level when it comes to the words tarot. You would have to actually learn the tarot meaning, and that card happens to be the Fool, or that card happens to be the not Four of Clubs. I've gone with that too, by the way. I've gone back to the minor arcana being clubs, hearts, diamonds, and spades, rather than the pentacles, the swords, the wands, and the cups. Yeah. So I've done that with the Victorian Tarot as well, to move away from that occult kind of feeling. And so, so anyway, so while you're right, there's also people that have deliberately added tarot elements to cards that aren't and were never intended to be tarot cards, really, just so they could get them published.
Just so they can get them published. Now, it's difficult to these days to get them published because you have not, as of yet, had your decks published.
That's not actually because it's difficult. I'll be really blunt about that. It's because they don't like my cards.
Well, there was another gentleman that you said self-published, and he does his own publishing. Why not?
Yeah.
Is reaching
because
out
they don't like. No. Oh, no. He just publishes his own deck.
Oh, okay.
No, the publishers don't like computer graphics, so I think they're behind the 8 ball there, because we live in a whole different world now where computer graphics are more than acceptable. To my mind, I haven't had anybody look and go, oh, I wish they were hand-drawn. And the reason I went to computer graphics is because I like complexity in pictures.
Yeah.
And I can do it. That's those two elements. but also this sounds really bad, and I really hate that it sounds really bad. But for the most part, I find oracle decks and tarot decks incredibly visually boring. So as soon as if I stepped out and I did a painting, which is what US Games said to me, if you drew these and you did them artistically, then we would be very happy to take them on. We just don't do computer graphics. And I was told that by two other companies as well, Llewellyn and another one that's in Switzerland. And in Switzerland, I said to them, but you've got one computer graphics deck. And they said, look, again, if you buy the cards, you'll see they look like computer graphics, but they're not. And I'm like, what? So that's like crazy stuff. So that obviously somebody's been told that. To me, I'm going to stick with that, because if I was to try and do, say, you're looking at this universe picture, there are elements you could not get with art. And I'm an artist, and I know that you can't. I've got a very good artist friend who does her own tarot decks as paintings. They are something in the region of about 24 inches high by about 15, 16 inches wide or 18 inches wide. And they are stunning. They are detailed. You take that and you make it small, and you lose all that detail. You can't see it.
Yeah.
So it has to be that big to see it. And I don't know if you're aware, but tarot decks always used to be bigger. The decks that I'm doing, none of them are going to be little for that reason. You lose detail. You just know yourself, if you look at one of these pictures small, especially, you're looking at this, it's quite large in the chat. You can see everything, can't you? You can see all of the elements in it. And if you want to use that and you go, actually I'm seeing these little flowers. Well, once that's made into a card, it'll just be a splotch of red, and I know this. So the original tarot decks were quite large. The first Rider-Waite tarot deck that I had was huge. In fact, all my first decks were huge. And then I got the Mythic Tarot. They were huge. And I liked that. But a whole pile of people complained. And so they've made cards cheaper and smaller and cheaper and smaller and thinner and so on. And now it's like, don't last. I go through one or two decks a year through usage because they're made so much cheaper now. But when they were large, there was something a bit special about that. I did learn to shuffle large decks. I've got small hands. I learned to shuffle large decks. But the thing here is that there was something special about that. But part of what works when you go pictorial is those details. And unfortunately, we've kind of lost that detail. And so the decks that I do get printed, I'll have to do them myself, but I'm going to make sure they're large, by the way, and I don't really care who complains about that.
Are they going to be about the size as the Crystal Ally cards?
Around about that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's exactly what you're looking at. At the size of a standard or a larger screen Samsung, 5.1. So if you look at it as a phone size, it doesn't sound as bad. but that's what a Samsung is now. They're all 5.1 inch screens. So
okay, because I like big cards. I mean, I love my Oracle decks, and I love the things, but I love this when they're big. You get to see them. Aside from the fact that I got to put my glasses on and squint.
Yeah. That is the whole point, is that you can see those details, and then they become part of a pictorial reference, or they will tweak your psyche. As soon as you lose those flowers and they're a blotch of red, then there isn't any psyche reference to a flower, is there? So you've got that kind of thing going on, the little blossoms in the tree that the bird's in and so on. So they'll all be bigger, except for, there is an exception to this, the Lenormand deck, again in the etching that I saw for her deck. When I say her deck, it was not really. Her deck was laid out, and you could just make out what was on the cards by the person drawing it. But she's actually doing a reading in this image. And her decks, her cards, when you buy them, are quite small, actually smaller than playing cards. And I kind of like that. I like those extremes and those little bits of difference and those sort of things that make them a bit special. If you lay out nice big cards on and you do a layout with, say, a Victorian tarot or a tarot deck, you watch people's faces, and I've watched this for years. They're really looking at your cards. They love the cards. They love how they look, and they love the specialness of it. And so I think we're robbing those people as well as me as a reader who likes to have big cards. And then if you look at something like the Sacred Souls Oracle, you want and need to see all of the details in those pictures because you're going to be reading that picture. And if you miss or can't make out what certain things are, and I've watched this happen with people when I've posted them and they're a little bit smaller, and I've had to say, click on it and you'll see the picture big, and they go, and suddenly they're seeing all those details. Well, that's going to be the same in printing as well. And then, of course, with the with the
Okay, we're going back to
with
that
the dark
bondage
rose.
card. You need to put that bondage card in.
It's in there. That's what I was.
No, I mean in
envisioning.
the chat so I can see it.
Oh, you want to see the bondage card? Okay.
Yeah.
The divination, dark rose divination card. Just go get bondage. I should have put the asylum in there. That's your card. I'll always think of that as your card now. It's like okay. So with these, they are what I would consider. What's the word I would look? These are art cards, really, and I don't know why they're not going in there now. Oh, there we go. It's gone, and there it is. It might have gone twice then because it took a while and I clicked it again.
No,
so these are very arty cards, and I want them big for that full appreciation. Yes, you can maybe zoom in on the rope or whatever, but because the word bondage is there, it's very clear. But I'm after, I want it to be seen like she's beautifully dressed, clearly, even though you can't see everything. She's dressed fairly feminine. She's got ribbons in her hair. She's got this intimidating facade at the end, and although it's there, it's not simply clear. There's that slightly dark aspect walking down the street, but in actual fact you can see she's sort of kneeling or sitting, and the only thing tied are her arms, so at any point she gives me the impression anyway that she could just stand up and walk forward if she wanted to. And so that was the whole thing. So these need to be big, aside from the fact that there's a bit of detail, and they're not as busy as the Sacred Soul deck. But for me, it's that impact. You know what I mean? You turn a card and it goes boom in your face, and I like that impact. It's like, wow. And what's attracting me to that? So these will be in that same sort of size range. I think you just lose so much when the card is pictorial oriented. The Voyager Tarot are quite decent sized cards as well, and so if it wasn't for that, then you would miss far too much of what you need to see just to be able to go forward, really. So larger cards, and then the Lenormand will be smaller, the other side of that coin, almost half the size of a regular playing card, or 2/3 the size of a regular playing card. And then I'm going to have a set of playing cards as well with it, so it'll be a double deck. There'll be the playing cards and there'll be the Lenormand pictorial, and then they can be drawn as a set. And I think that would work very well.
I've never learned how to read the Lenormand cards.
They're really different, and that's the thing that I like. They are nothing like a tarot deck at all. They don't have the meanings. She's got things in there that people try to align, but it isn't. And her deck is all about, with her pictorial cards, you never just lay out one or two. That's why I don't do them as readings per se very often, because I'm pretty aware that when you try to just break it down, it doesn't work. Her deck and her layout is so unique. And remember, she was famous, rich, and the only professional. She spoke to government members. She spoke to royalty, lords and ladies. She was making big bucks, at a time in the early 1800s. Think on that for a second. And so she died a millionaire essentially, and because it was sort of getting to the point of being looked at as the dark arts, she left her money to her nephew who didn't want to have anything to do with it. The money he thought was got through, he was very religious, and he thought the money was got through sort of evilness or bad things. But anyway, I'll put a card of Lenormand up there, the new Lenormand. So what you do with her deck is you lay the whole 36 cards out, and then you lay some other cards over those as you wish, but you're reading how close they are. So in there, because you laid everything out, there's a woman and a man card, and if you're a woman, you read everything radiating out from the woman card, and if you're a man, you read everything radiating out from the man card. And if those two cards are close together, then it becomes a friendship, a partnership, or something along those lines. So I just love it. And so I started learning about it a number of years ago, like about 10, maybe 11. Here, I'll show you a pretty little card. And of course, there are a number of different Lenormand decks that have been made up. And again, there's that idea of I prefer to find the concept of the card and turn that into the picture. So you can sort of read these pictures actually. They give you a strong guide or indication. This is the child card. And so you've got, and you can see I've got the king in there. And so those are what I'm going to be taking out. The numbers will stay, the picture will stay, but the playing cards will be taken out. And when she died, immediately in France, they started creating publications of her deck. By then, there was such a thing. And they had the meanings of her pictorial cards and all the rest of it. So they put the playing cards on the cards. And then, of course, I came back to it. You know, I just think things through. And I was thinking about it. And I thought, well, there were 52 cards even then. So they can only have 36 if they're in here. So you can't even have a full deck. Maybe she only used, you know, the court cards and up. It's a possibility. But either way, you've narrowed it down now. If I draw this one card or if I lay out the whole lot, I simply have to decide which ones, what am I reading? Am I reading her card or am I reading the playing card? And that's what I find a little tricky. And so when I saw this etching, I thought, you know, that makes more sense to me. So I'm going to take them all off, leave the cards as they are, but take them all off and create a deck of cards to go with it that is just the playing cards. So you lay them over. So once she's laid them all out, she's looked at the direction, she uses the playing cards to clarify or to gain more information. So I think that's a very interesting way to read, and that makes them an exceptional deck, as they have nothing at all to do with the tarot, and they predate the tarot that we know. Basically.
Looks like I'm going to have to get myself a deck of Lenormand cards.
And I wrote a book about that as well. Very simple little.
I'm going to be buying from you left, right, and center every day.
Well, again, it's just like that, looking at interpretations in the books that I got, you know, with the card. I've got 3 Lenormand decks. And there's the Blue Owl deck, which is really hard to get now. And then there was another Lenormand deck and so on and so on. And when I looked at the interpretations of them, there were some really wild differences to clearly what they would originally be. So I went and sourced an original sheet from the original publishers in France. And it's very basic. And it makes sense to me it would be basic because this woman knew her cards and she knew what she was doing, and so she didn't need to have screeds of pages about one card. Nobody should. If you look at a book, and this is for everybody really, if you look at a book on tarot cards and each card has 2 or 3 pages assigned to it, put the book back on the shelf and go find something a bit simpler, because that's where people get stuck. Right there. It's like, there's so much to learn, but actually there's only a small amount to learn. And then you use that to build upon the story. You know, you're creating a story when you lay out tarot cards, or when you lay out any number of cards. You're creating a story around a question or beyond a question, about a personality, about what's going on in here, what's the underlying current, what's going forward, what's going to happen in the future. Even a 3-card reading is yesterday, today, and tomorrow kind of a reading, isn't it? And then as soon as you start getting bigger and bigger, there's always that present or past or both aspects along with the future aspect. How did I get here? You know, where am I going? And where am I right now? And that's the whole key. There are beautiful layouts, which is, again, why I wrote that book, for asking questions about 2 people. It almost never works when you sit there and go, how does that person feel about me, or where is this going? What's happening here, when you barely know a person? Because as soon as you start asking those questions, you're not going to get the answers that make sense to you, because you're going to interpret that there's something, even if there's nothing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And if there's nothing, you can't read another person based on your feelings and desires for your information. So there are ways to do that, actually. There are layouts that you can use that separate you from that person, and so you can see more clearly where they're at. And it may not be in relation to you, and that's the big deal. It's just like when people send me questions and ask about a particular person that they've met that they like, male or female. I always regret that a little bit when I see the question, because when I feel like it's going nowhere, it's all right if it's going somewhere, which is maybe 1 in every 30. I'm not exaggerating either. The rest of them, the last 29, instead of them saying, you know, I'm looking for love and can you tell me when it's coming forward, which I can answer quite happily, they force you into giving them a positive or a negative answer about that person. And I learned
So instead of
to do
saying,
that.
so if somebody wants
Yeah.
a question, a reading about what, if they're looking for love, just say, I'm looking for love with Jack. If you
Yeah,
just say, I'm looking
exactly.
for love with somebody, is there somebody? It doesn't have, don't give a specific name type
That's
of
it.
thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If you're already in a relationship, it's different, obviously. But if
Mhm.
you are just chatting, because quite often it comes about when a person's been having some nice exchanges on, you know, social media or whatever.
Yeah.
That person might be married, in a relationship, or just not interested in you in that way, whatever it might be. But you're forced into a negative answer without a positive. And I learned that the hard way because I would be doing these readings on when I was doing online readings. Well, I do online readings, but I was on live chats and things. And
Mhm.
I would say, well, look, you know, this isn't going to go anywhere. And I felt a desire to sort of help them out. And so I'd mention, you know, but in October or November or whatever, I would read it and I'd say there's somebody coming forward for you. And that's something to look forward to. I got shot down a number of times. I would have a person sit there and go, I don't care about that. I'm asked about this person. Blah, 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 blah. So I stopped doing that. And it's like, now I feel like I'm narrowed into, I'm answering your question. And that's all you're getting because
Yeah.
you've provided me with a situation where, yeah, you can ask about love or you can ask about a person, and that's your choice. And so 29 out of 30 of those questions is going to be negative. Well, not going to be, it always has been negative. And so you're giving this person all these negatives, and sometimes they keep coming back with different names and different people over a period of time, and it's negative, negative, negative. So one lady, though, over a few years, when I did give her a positive, she was like, well, who? She said, I've been asking you for years, and you've never got it wrong. It's never worked out. And she said, since you said it's happening, I trust you completely. And she ended up getting married to that guy as well that I said yes
Oh.
to. So quite an interesting thing. So I don't play around with that and say yes when it's no. But it's an interesting thing from being read, you know, that do you really want to know if this person's interested in you? Are you really that sort of tied into it? Or would you like to know when love is coming? Because even if it's a couple of years, I had a woman go spares at me once. She'd said she'd just broken up. She'd had this affair with this guy, and she finally realised he wasn't even his wife. Da, 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 da. She said, right, now I'm resetting my vision. I want to know when love is coming. So she asked the right question. And I said, well, actually, I've got about 3 years. I do see some interactions between here and there, but I don't see a relationship for about 3 years. And she spun out. She goes, 3 years? No way. And she was wild. She got so wild, and then she hung up on me. She went away. She never came back and apologized, or she never came back and says, look, did you mean that, or whatever. She was just, I'm not waiting 3 years. And I'm like, well, it doesn't matter how many guys you bonk. It doesn't change the difference between having a bonk, meeting somebody, having an affair, to having an actual relationship. So it's very important, especially if you're asking for yourself, to think about the question you are asking, which I address strongly in my book, because the best question for the situation or the type of answer you require will get you the best information. So the question, as I see it, is always as important as the cards themselves. A bad question is a bad question whether you're using a clairvoyant, and it's doubly bad when you're using the cards, because that gives you a confused response, or one you can't interpret because it makes no sense. And sometimes you're not thinking about the question in the right way either. So I think it's also got that value. It's like, what do you really want to know? And I've got a set standard now. It's a stock standard that I say to anybody: never ask a question you don't want the answer to.
Well, I think that should be common sense for people.
No, because what they do is they say, I want to know, we'll go back to, I want to know if Jack loves me, right? Or if Jack's got feelings for me. Well, the answer no is a 50-50 possibility when it's being asked, right?
Yeah.
And so they don't want to hear no.
Yeah.
You're following? Some people would rather hear no than have false hope. That's the difference right there.
Yeah.
Some people would rather hear no than have false hope. They can move on. They're not in a relationship. They're not in love, really. They're just attracted and they know it,
Yeah.
Then you've got others who do not want to hear no. And so they should not ask.
Maybe you
That's
should
how
write a
I look.
book on teaching people how to ask the question, because
I have.
that's
It's
the
there.
thing.
Hello. I
You have a
have.
book? Okay. So I'm gonna have to get
Yeah,
that
so
book too.
you've got, it's in your book and it's,
Okay.
and it's, okay, she's like, oh gosh, here we go. And of
It's
course,
like, Darlene,
tarot
read the
companion.
book.
You read the book. It's in your book about the questions. You'll actually see if you look down the index or the contents that it's actually in there, how to ask questions, the different types of layouts. And then you go to the tarot companion and you'll see a very clear way to choose a layout that matches the type of question you're going to ask and then the questions you can ask that will suit that layout. You can expand on it, obviously, but it's pretty extensive. And sometimes you'll find questions in there that you haven't actually thought to ask that actually match what you want to know a lot better than what you thought to ask. Does that make sense? Did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
And so, and I've had that come up a few times when I've done shows and I've gone, this is a layout. And this is how the question that you ask, or this is how you do this layout, like the freedom spread is my own spread that I developed. It's obviously not copyrighted and anybody can use it. So I did a little video on how to ask the question and how to use that layout for, or how to ask a question for the week ahead, things like that. So it's an interesting thing to be able to do that. And if you do it correctly, in fact, that's on YouTube. You can go and have a look at how to ask a question for the week ahead and how to do a layout for the week ahead. Because if you're going to do that, you don't want to be drawing cards again and again and again. So I don't like to look at that. You want to understand it so that you can use that information. The only point in getting any level of reading at all is to get information and to use the information you get. But a lot of people have got into the instant gratification mode where they do the layout or they ask the question to be appeased, and that's not the same thing. So it's like eating a donut, regretting it. It's like I asked the question, I got an answer that's challenging. Oh bugger, I wish I'd never asked now. That kind of mentality sort of goes into it. If anybody wants a card, or if they want to draw off the decks, they can choose a deck if they like, if they're in the chat, and we'll draw a card and I'll read that for them if you like. I think we're getting into that zone, aren't we?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We can carry on talking. I just thought we'd let them know. Yeah.
Exactly. If anybody wants a card or has a question, pop it into the chat room. Wave your hand. Go, hey, Darlene, come on, Dorothy. I'll take a card, but I would take a card from the dark rose because I like them. But
Dark road divination.
Yeah. But my thing that I always have a problem with when I ask a question, I want the answer. If I'm going to ask a question, I will expect the answer, good, bad, or otherwise. I'll accept it. But I always have a difficulty asking a question. That's why usually when I go to a reader for something, or if I go into a show and they say, "Oh, call in, have your question ready," I can never zing it down to one question. And if I do, half the time the answer is already in my head. So it's like, I'm afraid to. I'm not sure if it's wording it as I'm afraid to get the answer is the same way as I am, but it sort of puts it into a box. I just sort of want whatever out there.
Yeah, well, so general's fine. The thing is, though, for most people, if there's an area, and that's where I sort of think of it when it's radio shows and they're little quick readings and a quick look. Some people do have a burning desire to know something, so that's fine. But usually it's just an area, career, life, general, family. If there's an area that's stickling. And again, radio shows, there's that tendency to keep it lighter. I never go too deep. Now and again, you're sort of forced to, address a health issue or something. If I see it, I kind of can't ignore it. But for the most part with this sort of thing, it comes down to it's a bit of fun. And if you get something valuable out of that, that's absolutely awesome. When a person asks for a general reading and something like this and they just go, I haven't got a question, 9 times out of 10, you're going to end up with, this is where you're at. This is what's going on. And so it's not necessarily future oriented, and that's fine too. It's down to that. I've never really forced people, as you know, to ask questions because It's a show. And if you have something that's really serious, you may not want that aired in public. It's like,
Okay,
you
Carol,
may
that's
not
what
want.
people think. I'd be
Well, I
like,
don't mean
okay,
you
yeah,
necessarily,
no, I
but
know.
yeah, other people. If
Mm,
they've got a big fight brewing with your husband and they're going to shows fairly regularly, people sort of have an idea of who they are. They may not want to reveal
true.
that,
Yeah.
they're having that kind of problem in public. So there's that aspect to it as well. But it's fun. I mean, you've seen me doing the hand readings and the flower psychometry, and it doesn't detract from accuracy to have something that's fun, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. Like you've been on my show a couple of times and you've done the food readings.
Yes,
And
the food.
the first time you did that when I was on another station, when I was on Paramedic Radio, you knocked my producer off his chair. That you were so good to I can't remember what it was, but Dave said, okay, yeah, and he said something and gave a picture or something, and you gave him a reading that just kind of like, wow, it was fun because people don't. That I don't think I've ever run into anybody who's done food readings before.
Well, there's a reason for that. As you know, this is your card, by the way. Do not laugh loud.
Hot diggity dog attitude.
Hot diggity dog. And she's a redhead. Look.
Of course.
This is you.
And she's wearing green.
Yeah.
This is so me. Yeah, okay.
This is you. Look at those peacock feathers behind, and do you see that word?
Attitude. Well, at least it's not the asylum again.
Wow, that was so funny though. And I hadn't long created that card, so it was even funnier because I was getting a proper decent look at it as in, I look at them in my programs and in my creator programs and so on, but when you put it out somewhere, you're seeing it different sizes, different formats, how it shows up online, that kind of thing. So I thought that was quite good fun. That was in Skype, yeah, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And so, you click the picture up and see it full noise, full size without all my little things on it that are what I'm developing for it. But where were we now? What were we talking about before I got sidetracked? Oh, your producer with the food reason. That came from hypnotherapy. So did the flower psychometry. I did psychometry as part of my early learning for skill set development. So there is a different thing. You don't, I hear people often saying things like you can't learn to be clairvoyant, you don't learn to be a medium. Well, actually you do. Anybody can have a vision. Developing it, understanding it, or taking it to the next level, understanding its interaction and commonality with the person that you are reading, being able to describe that well, being able to share that information in a productive way. We've both listened to a lot of online psychics who do that terribly. That doesn't matter how good the information is. By the time they've imparted it, we're all wailing in our chairs or wanting to stab them. It's like, oh my gosh, did you really say that to that poor woman? I've been in a show where I saw two hosts reduce a victim woman to tears, and she's sobbing, and she's such a victim mentality that she couldn't hang up the phone. And everybody in the chat's typing, hang up, just hang up, just hang up, just hang up the phone. And nobody liked those hosts for what they did to her. It was almost a feeding frenzy for them. They went from, we're doing a little reading, to now we're rubbishing the hell out of this woman for the choice that she's making or the choice that she's struggling with. And it was so judgmental and so horrible. That was such a long time ago on Blog Talk Radio. It doesn't reflect Blog Talk, just this show, but it was just terrible. And so you get a bit of that as well, where there's a bit of egocentricity in that, where, sometimes you do impart difficult information and you do it. I know I do it quite clearly and quite straightforwardly. I'm not mucking around with that. But the point is not to make it a judgment of somebody. So they were literally saying she was a bad mother for the choice she was making and da-da-da. And they just really swamped her. And it was, you could see what was in play there from a psychological perspective. The victim mentality, the victim persona gets bullied all the time, not just by their partner. They get bullied. And so these people had taken that mantle on and started to fire that down into her. But this is the bit, and you see this in other shows at times when you see somebody getting bullied in the chat or on the call, they don't just hang up. Why not just hang up? You're done. You're gone. And go and find somewhere else to make yourself feel better. So there's a bit of that. So there is that learning. But there's also a way to develop a skill set where you're now not just having a flash in the pan vision. You're not just getting a snatch of 3 or 4 words or one word or a name or little bits and bobs. You're getting a combination of a whole pile of information because you've developed your ability to tune into a long range. So instead of seeing a flash of a second of something and then holding that image in front of you and trying to build a story out of it, you get that flash and then you get the next flash and then you end up being more like a whole series or sequence of images and sounds and words and bits and pieces, smells, so everything comes into play. So to that end, I played with psychometry to, I don't even know what the frustration of my friends, I suppose. Anybody that came near me, come sit down, give me your jewellery, come sit down. And I'd be yanking rings off fingers and pulling chains off necks left, right and centre. And I had a set series of questions, which I use when I train people now, and a set series of questions that you go through. And you just go away and you practice that and practice that and practice that. And before long, you know that you are relocating, you know how to tune into another person really well. So there's that idea of when I'm reading a person, I want to know them, their life, where they are, what their attitude is, all of those things. And then I know I can advise them correctly. There's no point in me saying, well, you should just go up and tell them to naff off, because that might be something I would do, but they may be incapable of that. And so you can give them advice. This was brought to light again many years ago when I had my aura camera and I was doing aura photos one day, and this woman came up and she'd been trooping around a psychic fair, having a bit of fun, I thought, and you could see her going from space to space, and she'd gone to a very well-known Auckland healer back in the day, or even now he still calls himself a healer. It's something that I have a bit of a distaste for that term. She came and got an aura photo with me, and I just said to her, look, you see these colours here, it means that you can be very indecisive, but I see that's coming from a lack of confidence. And those was the word I said, and I just saw tears come into her eye, and I thought, well, here we go. And she turned around and she said, well, that man just said I was a people pleaser. And she said, people always tell me I'm just a people pleaser. And I said, well, I think that's got a modicum of correctness in it, but the basic idea we're looking at here is you haven't got confidence, so you seek the opinion of others. Mm-hmm. And you follow what they say because you're not confident in your own. So you practice confidence by going down the road by yourself without anybody else and going somewhere where they sell a lot of ice cream and choose one. Doesn't matter if it takes you half an hour, just choose one. And then do something like that every day where you choose something simply because you can without asking advice. And that eventually you just get better and better and better at it. There will always be areas that we're unconfident in and we need a bit of advice. But there's a difference in the way I spoke to her, which I was very aware of, and the way the person before me had spoken to her.
Yeah.
It's very dismissive to say you're just a people pleaser, but you hear it a lot. You're just a fixer without some kind of qualification, without some way of saying this is why you are like this. Mm-hmm. And that's when the light goes on for people, when they understand, oh, I'm like this because I feel insecure. I'm like this because I don't like the conflict around me. I want it to be peaceful. I'm like this because, and when you've got that because in there, then it takes away from a characterization or a judgment of character, and it actually includes you in an understanding of yourself. And I think those are my major remits. Hypnotherapy is why I do the hand readings. It's why I do the flower psychometry, and it's why I do the food readings. Now, the hand readings is a little bit different because it's the shape of the hands, but the food readings and the flower psychometry are all about every single choice we make reveals a part of us to somebody else. They're not aware you've done it. You're not aware you've done it, but the judgment or the characterization is made anyway. And so that's what's really interesting to me. And I do those shows to try and show that to people, that actually I'm consciously doing that, but everybody's subconsciously doing it. It's the same with the aura. I'm consciously doing it, but everybody's subconsciously doing it. So when you go and you get that big vase of complex flowers, or, I know you've seen this in the shows before. I always laugh when I say, bring me a flower, and they show me a field of flowers. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, okay, so you've got a lot going on in your life. And so there's never an accident. And I'm not sure if you're in the show with one lady sent me a picture. It was of, I'm trying to think what it was. It was a food reading, but it had skull and crossbones or something. It was a cake. And then she said, just joking, and she sent me another one. And I said, well, actually, you're going to get upset with me now because I'm going to read that because there's no such thing. I read the first one, and as I read it, I said, there's some kind of subconscious or low-level wish for somebody to die. Obviously not really die, but you just want them to go away. You want them to be destroyed. You want them to die. There's a complication in here because we've got this beautiful cake, and on top of it, we've got the skull and crossbones. And you chose it even if you think you were joking. There isn't. So there's one person in your life, at least right now, that you just wish would drop dead. You may say that in your mind. You may think it, even obviously it's not what you want to do. And sure enough, she was going through custody hearings with her husband, ex-husband. So huge, big deal. So we choose things, and when we understand that there is an underlying reason we choose it, even if we think we're joking, it's a revealing thing.
Yeah, there's some truth to it, even though, like you say, even though we think it's a joke, there's always something that's got the base of truth.
Exactly. It attracted you for a reason. I mean, without putting in skull and crossbones, I think I'd have trouble finding a skull and crossbone cake. So the fact that it popped up is part of her choosing. Do you know what I mean? The way she's searching, or what she put in there to search stuff. So it's a very interesting thing, and that's the thing with the food and the flowers. If you go and get your pictures offline, you've had to write something in a search engine for a selection of choices. You've either written rose, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you've written flowers, or you've written shrubs, or whatever you've typed in there. But even if you didn't, you've got a history in your browser which suggests the type of things you normally go and get. So there's a whole range of things underneath the actual single picture we're looking at the end. So I find it quite interesting, and I try to be very clear to say, when I'm reading your flower, I am not reading your aura, and I'm not reading your energy, and I'm not using clairvoyance. And when I'm reading your food, I'm not doing any of those things either. I try specifically not to. And if I do cut into that area, I will say, this is sort of going beyond that. I'm actually looking and seeing this vision, or I'm hearing that, or I'm, seeing colours in your aura. But that's to really show you don't need to. You can get an understanding of where a person's psyche is at just by looking at that choice, which is quite amazing. And it's the same if I laid out all my cards, and I said, now just choose one. They're all face up. Then if there's no writing on it, what you would choose is going to represent where your head's at. We can't help it.
Yeah.
In golf, I try to describe to people, when you've got a fear of, say twice, it could be once or twice or three times. You've hit a ball on a particular hole that's visually deceptive, and it goes off into the trees to the left those couple of times. And then the next time you come to it, your mind is drawn to the trees. You try not to look at them, but where your mind is drawn, your body actually follows. So even if you're not actually looking at it, it's in the back of your mind, and so you go and do it again. And when your mind, because I hypnotize people for golf, by the way, just saying. And so when your mind is on that hole only, then your body follows through in a more direct line. And so that's what people do that make things better or worse in general. And we can call it the law of attraction, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
So there we go.
So tell me
another very long diatribe.
That's cool. So tell me about attitude. Other than
for this, yes. So for this, I've really drawn to the idea that you need to be able to present yourself over the next wee while, whether it's at work or whether it's in some other way, shape or form, or even if it's changing jobs, whichever way that might promote for you, you need to be able to say to others, this is what I can do, as opposed to just doing it and hoping that they notice. Does that make sense for you?
Yeah.
And so thinking that, I can get the job done and this is who I am, it's not really about confidence per se in this moment. It's about saying and making sure somebody hears that this is what I'm capable of, and not feeling like that's sort of bragging, because it's only bragging if it's not true, actually.
Yeah.
Isn't that right?
Yep.
If a person's good at kicking a ball over a goalpost, because I love rugby, we'll put that one out there, and then somebody says to them, well, look, we need somebody to kick a ball over the goalpost. How are you at it? And they say, well, I'm pretty good. You might think, okay, that's modesty and all the rest, but the person just hears, I'm pretty good. They might want somebody who is excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the sort of thing I'm getting from this card for you today, is that whole feeling of making sure others do know what you are capable of at this point in the next few weeks, the next month. If there's an opportunity, and if you are actually asked, without, waffling on for 5 hours about how marvelous you are, to simply be able to say, well, actually, I do that very, very well.
Yeah.
Do you need it? Do you need that from me? Or whichever way you go. And that will work really nicely for you. And it's a good attitude, but it's also the attitude that says, I'm happy to back myself, isn't it? You know.
Yep.
I know nobody would hire me if they said, you know, well, how good are you? And I says, well, you know, I'm okay.
I'm freaking
There's
awesome.
a point. Oh, no, see, I can't say that. I can't say I'm freaking awesome, because that goes the other way. But I can say, well, actually, I'm very competent at what I do, which is a certain amount of modesty, but it says, look, competency means I know what I'm doing very well.
Yeah.
I can say it in a number of different ways, depending on who's asking. But to not tout yourself is the opposite of what you need to do when you want to get the job, get the promotion, have a better look at something, get a new part of the job, or get something else going, or even just to show somebody what you can do.
Yeah.
You know, we never need to be doing that from the back foot. If you're an authority on something and you're very good at something, the only way up is by demonstrating that in some way. And because I'm picking up the verbal element to this card, it suggests to me that you might just do it and maybe expect others to recognize the effort that you put in, or how much work you put in, or how much was yours and not somebody else's. But this may need to be actually spoken. It may need to actually be said, yeah, it took me 3 hours, or yes, that took me an hour and a half, or yes, I'm really glad I learned that skill, whichever way is required in that moment, to impress upon another person that you have a skill that you have utilised and you know how to use very well. That's the sort of thing we're looking at. Okay?
Okay. Very nice.
Practice it at home too, if you've got boys at home.
No, I tossed all the kids out the house.
Oh, good for
the only,
you.
the only
So
boys, the
that
only
puts,
boys I have are well, of course my husband, but the
well,
four-legged.
even him, you know, you're enjoying your spaghetti marinara. It took me 20 hours to make that sauce.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
That kind of thing. Yeah, because usually if I'm looking at something like this and it has to be verbal, there is the danger of feeling unappreciated, or having others take advantage, or, you know, taking you for granted in this kind of energy if you don't speak up. So just bear that in mind.
Okay. Well, for those of you who are listening and not going to get to see the picture, I will put this picture, if it's okay, Dorothy,
Yep.
with the on my Facebook page. So
Yep.
on the radio show page, so that you'll be able to see the picture that she's talking about. And by the way, I think she is absolutely gorgeous. Like you said, she's redhead, she's in green, but the name that pops into my head and is Maureen O'Hara.
Well, it might be. I don't know. I don't know who it is.
Yeah. But it's
So
just like you said, it's, for me, it's the attitude she's got. Like, like you said, I'm good at this, you know, and I know what I can do and what I can't do.
yeah, it's, don't ignore me. Look at me. Now, this is a black and white picture of her. The rest have added everything else in there, including all the colours and so on and so on. So the thing here is, of course, that you're taking something as well. You're taking what the word to me is experience, and bringing that forward, and then saying, well, you don't get this without effort. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Don't get this qualified. You don't get this experienced. You don't get this competent. And competence is a really good word. You don't get this level of authority or autonomy over what you're doing without putting a lot of effort, time, and energy into something, so that you can feed it back into a system, or into a place, or into a job, or into the kitchen, with a level of aplomb and a degree where other people are not just appreciative of that, but could even maybe go, wow, that was really amazing, that was awesome.
Yeah.
You know, but we do go through periods where, especially at work, but at home as well, where we feel like, you know, that experience and that energy and that effort we're putting into is not being necessarily seen for what it is. And when we start to feel unappreciated, or we feel like other people are ungrateful, 9 times out of 10, they really aren't recognizing the amount of effort that's gone into it, or the amount of experience you've already picked up to put into it. If it's a job that you're talking about, or a promotion, or a new job, then it's vital for that to be seen and not played down. Yeah, so there you go.
Okay, we have a quiet chat room this evening.
Yes,
If people want to get a
fine.
reading from you, your try again, darling. Your website, www.energytherapies.com.
No, it's
No?
www. No, not now. I'll tell you why. I had to change that. Well, I didn't have to, but I changed it because I started getting a number of complaints because there's another energytherapies.com. I was always .nz or .co or
Okay.
.us. I kept changing the back end of that, but I
Mhm.
ended up with just .nz and because I could never get .com, and that's because .com was taken by a spam company.
Oh.
So if you hit energytherapies.com, I don't know if they've still got it because I've moved well past it. I thought I'd check back every year to see if it changed, and initially I think people were finding it easier, but then, Google and all these other places started adding endings for you. You'd start with that and they'd finish it off. And so
Mhm.
they were ending up on this .com site, which is nothing but a spam page where if you click anything, you're going to get invaded by bad cookies and lots of stuff. And so I had a number of people over a period of about 6-7 months saying, we went to the site, we know it wasn't you, but we had to get our computer cleaned out and da-da-da, and I just thought, right, I'm over that. So I just went www.dorothyholder.com. There is no left, right or centre of that.
What's
So
his
that's
name?
it. So
Oh my God. Okay,
that's
wait a
been
second.
dorothyholder.com for a while now.
I'm just quickly. I'm typing it in so that I can put the link into the chat room, right? But what do I get? Dorothy Holder obituary. No.
Ah, don't go there. Well, actually, I could be speaking from the other side. They put a phone in Wellington in New Zealand, a phone downtown by the beach actually, and it's a spirit phone so that you can call your dead person and talk to them. And I've heard a lot of comments about how ridiculous it is and so on, but it's being very well used. And I like the idea of it, that it's not actually, like a paranormal spirit phone, but the
Mhm.
idea is that you feel like you are talking to somebody because it is a phone. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're holding the phone and you're talking into it, and you can just tell them how you feel. You can say your stuff. It's better than talking to a headstone. A lot of people don't have headstones anymore because of cremation,
Yeah.
and so you've got this space you can go and feel like you've rung up and are talking to your beloved, and it's incredibly well used, and I just really like that concept, and I love the fact that a New Zealand city bothered to do that, bothered to put it in there, and allowed for the fact that you don't have to do it, you don't have to believe in it, you don't have to like it, but they're not saying it's spiritual, they're saying it's psychologically sound to
That
give a
makes
person
sense.
an
Yeah.
outlet. Yeah, and I agree with it, psychologically sound.
Mm.
When you lose somebody, it's very well known that if you write a letter to them, and you write letters to them during your grief, and you express how you feel, you actually are faster moving through to a period of experiencing the loss without the grief, or
Mhm.
the grief becomes intermittent. It's a really interesting aspect for me. And again, I'm always drawn to anything like the hypnotherapy, anything psychological, anything that works quickly and
Mhm.
helps the person. How can anybody else complain about that, right? So we don't
Yeah.
actually get complaints here because we're pretty open about stuff. I can remember when we legalised prostitution, a number of religious organisations took out big ads in the newspapers. New Zealand's going to hell in a basket, and we were all like, let's jump into that basket, shall we? And then of course we introduced gay marriage, and then we introduced, because now churches in New Zealand have to marry gay couples, or they're not allowed to marry anybody.
Okay.
That's the rule. And so we don't care. If you can call yourself a church, but if you can't marry everybody, we've got no place for you here. So I really like that. So the churches in other countries are saying, well, you might make it legal, but we're not doing that. Not here. They're not allowed to. They have to marry everyone that wants to get married in their church, or no one. So I like that. So I like New Zealand for those reasons. It's sort of like, come on, if we're going to acknowledge them as people and all the rest of it, what's your problem exactly? So it's
Yeah.
kind of interesting. But this is where this comes into it. It's this whole concept that a government, because Wellington's our capital city, this is where our government is housed. It's very cerebral. It's very much arty. It's got all of those things that capital cities tend to have. It's got high class restaurants. Auckland has too, but Auckland's much more fun. Wellington's it's smaller, but it's very much more dignified. Auckland's where everybody runs up and down the road and there's sailing boats and we all get out fishing and have a ball. Wellington's where people go out to dinner and they go to cafes and they go to Te Papa's, our national museum, art gallery, and it's just amazing. Those are it's very cultural, and Auckland's very playful. That's how I see the difference of the two. Auckland's the biggest city in New Zealand, but Wellington's got that political culture thing going on. And so there they did it, and I would have expected Auckland, and so that they did it there I thought was even better. And I'd like to see one in every city in New Zealand, to be honest. And somebody sat down and took the time in local authority to sit down and say, wouldn't this be a good idea? Because we understand that if you write letters to the dead and you can feel like they hear you, you come past your grief a lot faster and you accept their passing a lot easier. And so let's put a phone down by the beach so you can look at the sea, you can put your feet in the sand. And it's like a payphone, only you don't have to pay. Obviously, that would be a rip-off.
Yeah.
Yeah, 20 cents a call. And there's that.
Well, it could go towards cleaning up the beach. There you go.
Oh, it's just, no, you can't make people pay for that. But the whole idea and the concept, I think, is lovely, really lovely.
Yeah.
And
Jackie in the chat room said she may sneak down to the beach this week and install a phone.
Good on you, Jackie. That's the way to go. So they're just very pleasant, nice ideals and ideas. And that's the same way I look at the cards and things like that. You can use them for far more than looking at the future. And originally, when it comes to the Rider-Waite deck and Life is Levi, they are intended for self-discovery. The major arcana is about self-discovery, by the way, and that's why people get so confused with them. They look at that as, well, how does that relate to my relationship? Well, it doesn't. It relates to you, your spirit, your person, your higher self, the underlying energy of something, the spiritual energy of something, rather than what's going to happen. And minor arcana tends to be more situational, where you're going, what's going on, the flaws and foibles of humanity, the stages we go through. There's the honeymoon stage, woohoo, celebration. The Three of Cups, everybody's in the glow stage, the honeymoon stage, whether it's new business, whatever. We'll have drinks, we'll eat plenty, we'll feast, we're doing great. It's very social, it's very fun loving. And then of course you've got your Five of Swords, where there's maybe a little bit of deception going on, or Five of Cups, there's that feeling betrayed, things have let you down. This is how we feel about things, and every thought comes after a feeling, not before a feeling. So it's kind of an interesting psychological experiment, if nothing else. When it's used that way, you can get so much more out of a deck of cards, and that includes some oracle decks. If you're using them for understanding yourself, a situation or life, so that you can manage it better, then you are on a win-win situation. When you use it just to know what's going to happen next, you're kind of consigning yourself to, I'm just going to let that happen. I'm just going to carry on until that happens. If you want to look at something that could go badly and you are talking to a professional and they say, I don't see this going so well for you, you might need to, that's the way I tend to talk, you might need to think about blah, 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 blah. You get all that sort of advisory with it. Then a person's got options to change what they're doing, the way they're doing it, the direction, that kind of thing. And then you're taking charge of your life. You're just using cards as a way to guide your choices based on where things are likely to lead. The truth is, I've always had this double-mindedness about reading the future, because as I see it, I can only see a future that's in play. Does that make sense or not?
Yeah. No, it does.
You can't see something that's not going to happen. It doesn't make sense. So you'll either see, for example, if somebody says to me, look, I'm thinking of taking this trip in December, I now just have a yes or a no go. But back in the day, I used to see a little fat plane, a little fat plane, and it would either take off or it wouldn't.
Oh, I like that.
I'm not kidding. a little cartoon fat plane. I'd see this little plane. If it took off, I'd say, that's going to go forward for you. And then I'd get a sense of timing. It could run a bit later. It might be when you think, da-da-da-da-da. Some things are so on point that I'm still flabbergasted myself. About 3 years ago, I read for what is a fairly regular client. Every now and again, she pops up. She'd asked about, a man. I said, look, I see you on the veranda with this man. And it's been 3 years later, so she was asking about a different sort of situation. And then more recently, she got in touch with me, and she was running through a few things that I'd said. And she said, these were all bang, bang, bang on point. She said, and she actually mentioned this, but you said about this sitting on this veranda when you were meeting this guy. She said, and she showed me a picture of her sitting on a veranda with her boyfriend. She says, but I've known him for a year. We've been going out for a year. And I said, who are the other couple? And she says, I was meeting his parents. And I thought, pedantic much?
There you go.
But that was from 3 years ago. So she set those things in motion in her life. They were always going to happen because of the way she set them in motion. Is that fate? No, I don't believe that. It's just that with our personalities, the way we think, what we desire, what we hope for, it forms a path for us that we tend to stay on until we can't stand it anymore or until it pays off. In her case, she wanted to go back to Israel, and she really desired that. So she set this thing in motion, and because of that, she met this Israeli guy while she was still living in Canada, and so on and so on. Do you follow? So it followed a course that she was directing by her desires. So it's an interesting aspect. So I don't believe that 3 years prior to that I could see. It was literally an image of her sitting with this man on a veranda with a big wide view behind her. She showed me the reading. It's all in writing. And, of course, sitting opposite in the actual photo is this older man and woman, and it was his parents, and she had gone to Greece to meet them, and they were having dinner on this terrace with this beautiful vista behind them. Quite amazing. So that understanding and that looking forward to things and seeing them, and that's not one, that's one of many things, including things for my own self, tells you that there is a level of future direction that we've got that leads us to only that one place unless we drastically change something between here and there. So I always go, if I'm looking at something a few years ahead, you've got plenty of time to change something now. If it's not good, you better change something now. If it's great, just keep doing what you're doing. You'll end up there. So that's how I tend to see that, and that is how I tend to like to look at it as well, that you've got information, and the further away it is, the more you can do about it, the more you can change it, the more effect you can have on it. When I get asked, do people change things, which deck, Mags, when I get asked, but you can change things and it's just a possibility, my answer to that is not really. Yes, you can change things, but the truth is most people don't. Even if you give them a negative, they do absolutely nothing. I had a woman many years ago in a show spin a little bit at me because she was having an affair with a man, and she had said to me, we're going to be together, we're soulmates, what's going on, da-da-da-da-da. And I said, well, I don't see that. I see another child for him. I see him staying in his relationship. She wasn't very happy with that at all. Anyway, when I told her that, she ended up with, oh, well, it's my life lesson, I guess. I've got to do it to know. And all I'm thinking is, well, no, you don't. But your life doesn't have to be a lesson, but it can become one. So most people, genuinely, no matter how hard the information is you give them, genuinely don't change that. And so can doesn't translate to do. Oh, I know what she wants. Okay. Well, my favorite.
Yeah, sure. Okay, here's a quick question while you're drawing her card. If somebody wants to start to learn the tarot, would you suggest that they start with learning the cards first, like the major arcana, and then, or just dive in to the whole thing?
I would learn the cards, but I would do like the most simplistic learning of the cards. So yes, go and buy a book is a really good way. If you don't want to go full noise and be instructed by somebody like me, as I was by Sylvia Shardy Vowlas, to go to that degree of knowledge, then you buy a book. Buy one that's simple, directive, that gives you a very clear example of what's what, and then just learn the words that go with the cards. Now, I would divide the deck. I would take the major arcana out and then start with suits because one, you're already fairly familiar with them based on playing cards, you know,
Yeah.
and secondly, they are very recognizable as an emotional thing. So, you know, if you've got the aces, for example, are obviously something new, fresh, something that's coming into your mind. It's not really formed yet. It's a beginning of some sort. And then you've got your two. So you've got a natural order of numbers that we understand, and you've got your court cards. So that's what I would do. I would start there. And then I would, with that, at the same time, I would really learn layouts really well. Because
Okay.
when you've got a number of layouts at your display, everybody sort of goes diving straight into a 3-card reading. It's not appropriate for everything, and it doesn't make things easier necessarily. So go and learn the layouts, understand layouts, and which layout works best for which type of question. When you have a couple of resources like that, you can draw cards every day with
Mhm.
different results, with different questions, with different things, rather than I've only got one question, I've run out of it, now we're 2 weeks in, I'm still just saying how's my day going to go, or I'm still doing yesterday, today and tomorrow reading, you know, past, present and future reading, and so on and so on. It just makes no sense after a while. So it's not fun.
Mhm.
People do much better when you go, all right, so I'm going to ask about the relationship, and I'm going to ask about, say, my daughter and her friend, or I'm going to ask about my cousin and their mother, whichever way you go, and ask about myself and my cousin. You've got huge possibilities right there, and I'm going to use this layout to do that. And you can do that a number of times a day without exhausting yourself or ending up by just asking the same questions over and over and over again.
Okay.
And which, aside from being boring, it's limiting in a lot of ways. So hang on, we've got this card for her. Here it goes.
So if anybody hears some weird noises, Onyx is on my lap licking.
So cute. So you've drawn the love card. Now, so I'm going to ask Mags to
Ooh.
choose what stands out for her in the card. This is the Sacred Souls, of course, and you can see all that detail in there that would be lost in a smaller card. And even as you know, even on the computer, when it's a little bit smaller than this, you miss certain things like the picture or the writing on the little wooden hearts. A lot of people don't see the rings when it's smaller, so you want them to be of a size that every aspect of that picture, because even the bubbles have a description, meaning if you're going to read it for yourself and you go, wow, I'm really drawn to that warrior, I'm really drawn to that bird, the rings, I'm really drawn to the pear cut, whichever part draws you. So you could choose a part for Max, because this is her card. Just so everybody knows, I'm not choosing the cards. I have a program that I can do layouts. I've got X amount of spreads in them. I've got my decks loaded into them. So this is what it was just not a freedom spread, but it's free choice, and they're all laid out in a long line, and I just run up and down them looking at the back of the cards, and then thinking of Mags, I just chose one and out this popped. So that's how it comes to be. Yeah. She's drawn to the Kia. Yeah, she's drawn to it's a Kia bird, by the way. Now, the Kia is a New Zealand parrot, and it is known for being cheeky, really naughty, and actually quite destructive. Does it care? Not at all. So being drawn to that in this card suggests to me, Mags, that you may need to be a little bit aware that you may, you know, when you just go into a period where you sort of deliberately goad somebody. I've got that feeling around it. You may deliberately goad somebody knowing that they are either going to get upset or you're just going to have fun at their expense. But it is a cheeky, fun vibration as opposed to a destructive one. However, bearing in mind that the Kia can be quite destructive, there's no getting away from that, actually, that it can be a bit destructive. Now, the destructive element to that isn't necessarily one of, or that would lead to super regrets or, you know, major problems, I guess. But it's something to be aware of that, I guess, if I was to say anything about that bird and the fact that you chose it, it would be know where to stop. How's that? It's probably a good time to know where to stop and where to call it a halt or, you know, let it go. You know when somebody's being pushed to a certain point. So that leaves you perhaps realising where the point of no return is, and there's always one. There is always one. So think along those lines just a little bit, perhaps, I would suggest. Did you pick up anything in that card?
Actually, I've chose the rings. I believe they're rings in the bird's claws.
It is. And of course, for me, that sort of plays in with what I was thinking as well anyway, because I guess it sort of directs you to the idea that it could be poor old hubby.
I swear to God, I haven't killed him. I brought him out in public last week.
I was thinking for Max, she drew the card.
Okay.
So, yeah, so with the goading thing is what I'm talking about. I've just been talking about her sort of being a bit cheeky with goading, with pushing somebody to the edge a little bit, and with you seeing the rings there. I mean, you can interpret that however you like, actually. But as soon as you said that, I thought, I'm wondering if she might be going to, push the point with hubby a little bit.
Poking.
It's always possible. It's always possible. But of course, the book, there is a full book with the cards which describes all of the actual meanings, but we're demonstrating the pictorial quality of, you just look at that picture. And when a person does draw a picture and you're drawn to something in it, then it's what it means to you, right? It's how you interpret that, how you see that. And there is no doubt this is a love card. And so there's going to be that element of relationship in it, as long as you see that. And of course, the rings is going to clearly define a relationship angle, right?
Yeah.
But it can be passion. Sometimes you've got to fight for what you love and things like that. So it depends. The wooden hearts can represent fake love, not really meaning it or not feeling it at the moment, those kind of things.
So for this
Bit of fun.
deck, you've written a book.
This deck has a very comprehensive book mainly for if a person wants to read for themselves. And when you get you can learn from the book. Every symbol in every card, or not every single symbol, but every card has 6 to 8 symbols that are defined in the book. So you could draw the card and say, I'm interested in the hearts on the clothesline. You will go in and you will see the hearts on the clothesline.
So every picture, everything about this card, for example, you have the spilt milk, you have the bubbles.
Yeah,
you have
I have the bubbles,
dolls,
the Māori warrior, the dolls, the Petrushka dolls. They also all have earth. This is a water card, as you can see, the little fishies, the little angelfish.
Yeah.
So we have the earth, water, air or spirit, and fire cards. They've all got that around them. And each card, again, has this defining meaning. So a card has its own meaning, which you can use or take, or you can choose a symbol out of it if you're reading in particular for yourself. You can do it reading for others too. The point of this is you don't need to.
Yeah.
So if you, like Mags actually really loves these because she reads them incredibly well without learning anything, without reading a book, without looking at anything. It doesn't have to match my meaning. It just has to match what the person you're reading needs. Do you know what I mean? So it doesn't have to find its way into, this is what Dorothy's book means. It doesn't need to go there at all. It only needs to go as far as what it needs to be for the right person, I guess, is the best way to put it. And so it's understanding that elements to these cards. They're very, very ridiculously complex, which I think is fun. I don't have a problem with it. It's meant to be complex. It's meant to be something that if you were reading this for yourself, you're going to get something incredibly, incredibly accurate for you. So if somebody else in the chat could choose a card between 1 and 36, we can pop it up there and I can show you exactly how that works between what is visually drawn by a person from a card to the card itself.
No, we only have the guest, which can't choose because they can't type.
Okay, you choose. Me,
okay, between 1 and 36?
Yes, between 1 and 36.
17.
17?
Mm-hmm.
And that's wounds. So we'll draw this up. So this isn't so much And once you look at it, you'll see exactly what I mean. And so if both you and Mags can have a look at the deck itself, at the card itself, and say, what am I drawn to? What is attracting me? And this, we were too late getting to the readings, obviously. So what is drawing me in this direction? What is drawing me in this card? What part of this card do I find myself attracted to? And then the other person, so if Mags does one and you do one and you read that for each other, you look at it and say, this is what it means to me for Mags, and Mags does it for you, you'll see that they're actually very easy to read, which is the point, based on that.
I believe this was the deck that we worked with when we did the Skype reading.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So yes, Mags, I'm waiting for this deck too. This one and the dark rose.
The divination of the dark
Mm-hmm.
rose. Dark rose divination set. Stop making me confused.
She's
Dark
changing
rose
the name.
divination. Yeah. So which part of this card are you drawn to? And Mags, which part are you drawn to? If you can type that in there. And then you can describe the part she draws, and she can describe the part that you're drawn to.
Okay.
And we'll see how we go with that. And then I'll read the meaning for those, okay? Do you follow?
Yes.
And you can see this is the Earth card. These are Earth cards. So that has its own aspects as well, I guess.
For me, it's a spider, and I see healing the heart, stitching it together.
The spider, yeah, and the heart.
And Mags is the light that looks like a human. Yeah, see that.
Okay. So what you do there is you, Mags, read the spider bit in the heart, and you read the light that's the human or the person.
So I'm reading the light for Mags?
You're reading Mag's bit, and she's going to read your bit. She'll type it in there, what it means in relation to each other. So you're looking at that and you're thinking, so for Mags, what does this part mean,
For me, I see that because it's like she said, it's for her, it's a human. I see her, the light is for me, the heart area. So she's still reaching out and shining her heart too. I don't know. It's her heart shines. No matter where she reaches to, no matter who she's reaching out to, her heart's the most important thing she shares with people.
Nice. Very nice. And Mags, if you do the same for
My spider.
So the book meanings are really comprehensive, by the way. So there's that understanding of course, that if you are looking for something for yourself and you're drawn to that and you read this, then there's no real going subjective with it, you know. And so you're the spider, and she's like, you may be interested to know, when I designed this card, the part that looks like a human to you turned out that way accidentally. I was just doing all the colours in the background.
Wow.
So, and then when I looked at it, I thought, oh, that looks like a person.
Yeah.
And that heart, that light is coming from what would roughly be the lung heart area and solar plexus of that person. So I thought that was really interesting, and it's genuinely not where I was going. If you have a look at it, you can actually see, oh, actually that's just light aspects over a background, and there's no person in that background. It's a very complex background. Most of these particular cards have anything up to 10, 20 layers of them on them per card.
Yeah,
Some
I
go up
cannot wait till
40 layers.
this. I'm going to have to save this one because I'm going to put that in.
Okay, she's taking a sec. Because she's doing your one, you've done her one with the light, so maybe I can describe that while we're waiting for her anyway, and then I can come back to the. So we've got the golden light. Really, is what you were drawn to, yeah?
Yeah, that's what she said. Yeah.
So with the light, that's what she chose.
That's
yeah?
what she chose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when the eyes are drawn to the golden light, you may also notice the body form. Reaching out from the mist of the past, you may hold a love connection that causes you pain. But the golden light shows that healing is at hand. You are ready to evolve, and almost like magic, what felt like an irrevocable sense of yearning is lifted, and life falls at your feet in an offering of an exceptional future. Oh, did I write that? Yes, I did.
You should. She's having trouble with my spider.
And so what you're seeing there is there's no right or wrong in that interpretation that a person has. So I'm saying if you use the book, there's something there for those who are, like I said, if you're going to read for yourself, then you do need a bit of guidance into that. Picture reading for yourself is just, no, don't do it. No matter what your deck of cards is, to my mind, just don't do it, because you will always radiate, to the challenges that you see. And some of the symbology, if you're drawn to that, you may need the book to know what that symbol actually means, like the KO in there is Object Kowal. And Object Kowal is, in actual fact, the representation of a planet that turned out not to be a planet, that they thought might be they thought it might be something else, I can't remember what it was, meteorite, and then it turned out to be, or an asteroid, and it turned out to be a meteorite, one of the way, I can't remember now. But it's Object Kowal was the name that was given to it when it changed. So it's transformative. And of course, as you can see, there's the word OK on it. Well, they changed its name from Object Kowal when they decided it was an asteroid or meteorite to Chiron, by the way.
Okay.
Chiron, you understand that symbology at all? The wounded healer, by the way. That's what Chiron represents, the wounded healer. And so there's a whole lot of material around that. So you may need to look into the book for certain symbologies if you don't understand them. But for the main part, you'll be looking at things that resonate and feel right for you with the things that you chose. If you drew the card for Mags, you may have drawn something different, and so you'd see something different. So that makes it a little bit more, not so much difficult, but it makes it a little more challenging because we haven't got a natural card choice, if you know what I mean. And you're both reading each other out of one card, which means it's a bit forced, but it's just a demonstration. So she's got the heart has been hurt and stitched back together. There is someone you keep giving your heart to. So that's a really interesting way to look at that. And very good too, by the way, thank you, Mags, and very good for you too. And so it just shows that if she had drawn the card for herself and you had drawn another card for yourself, then you would be looking at it different. Or if she had the deck and she's drawing cards for you, the biggest focus is always going to be on another person. Two people trying to get a message out of a card that they didn't really draw, it just makes it a little bit more cerebral. But the spider in this, the meaning that I've got written here in the book is, as your animal guide, the spider calls you to recognize your fears and to expose the darker side of your personality to your own scrutiny. Not everything we fear comes from without. It can also represent anxiety caused by knowing our own nature and fearing outcomes based on habitual behaviors. If spider appears threatening to you, it is likely you have given up any idea of making the necessary changes to ward off unwanted outcomes. So very intense stuff. Gosh, I'm intense.
That's okay. We still love you.
But yeah, they are rather deep and meaningful for the most part. And so, but that's what I like. You know, I like that stuff. If you're going to draw cards, you better get a lot out of them, to my mind. And the more you get out of something or a part of something, the more you resonate with it. You know, the more amazing it feels to you when you're in there. So there's essentially the whole course, and I suppose we've done our chips time-wise now. But I hope you enjoyed that, everyone. I hope you did enjoy that, even though we didn't get to the readings till really late.
That's okay. Unfortunately or fortunately, most people are used to my show doing that. We end up having so much fun. So, but I'm hoping to have in the new year, I keep telling everybody, I'm hoping to have an all-reading show. So when I book that, maybe you'll think of coming back and do some readings.
Oh, I certainly will.
That'll be fun.
No problem at all. We can have a look at whatever you like. You know how that goes.
Yep. And when this deck is published, which I don't care if we gotta, Mia and I have to pay for our own to get it published, this deck and the books. I want it.
Oh, well, I'll tell you right now, I'm looking at maybe going through Kickstarter to get like a pre-sale thing going, so that I can pre-sell some decks so that I can get the printing underway. I'm still checking in with a few printers and just making sure. Luckily, because I had a book on auras printed recently, Mags bought it and she showed me the photos of the colour pick prints, which were beautiful. Unfortunately, the printer that I've been looking at was showing me colour prints of my cards that I wasn't 100% happy with, and I was nearly going to accept it because I didn't think I could get any better. And although I'm not stupid, they were saying, this is how it's done, this is what we do. And then I looked at that and I thought, if Amazon can make a perfect representation of my picture, then so can a jolly well printer that's going to charge me money. So that's where we're at with that, is me just selecting a printer, getting price, and as soon as I've got that, then I can pre-sell, and then we go from there. So it's closer than you think. Yeah.
Okay. Well, when you do, and you get the and if you're using the Kickstarter, you make sure you let me know, and I will kick the Kickstarter and anybody else.
Yeah, we'll kick ourselves into getting it done. So that's pretty much the way I'm going to go, so that I can ensure getting it printed and started, and then maybe with luck, if we can get that motivated, it will pay for the second deck, or I could do another Kickstarter for a second deck. But anyway, that's where I'm going anyway. So that's happening. It's not even not going to happen. I'm finished with the publisher side of it. But thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. It's been fun. Mia, thanks for hanging tight. Jackie, thanks for hanging tight. For everybody in who was in the chat room, I'm glad you were here. Sorry you had to leave early, but we got it. Mia and I got it all. Thanks everybody, and we will see you again next week. Actually, no, next week I forgot. Next week I'm taking a weekend off. It's my wedding anniversary, so I'm not having a show. Night, everyone.